Hey guys, it's Jonathan and Blake from Just Nerds here, and we want to talk about a particular subject that's been like kind of just been interesting to us over the last few years. And the reason why we want to talk about it is because Nintendo, with the new Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, they announced a new DLC pack or a expansion pass. And with that expansion, it has three parts to it. So the first part is coming out in March 3rd, 2017, with three new treasure chests, and then so that's the first part. DLC Pack 1 comes out in summer 2017. It adds new Cave of Trials challenges, a new hard mode, additional map features, and then DLC Pack 2 comes out in the holidays of 2017, which comes with a new original story, a new dungeon, and additional challenges. So the idea is that Nintendo has been usually pretty good with their DLC, and it's just that with this, Nintendo seems to be doing a more of how would you say, Blake?
I guess I'd say more modern route.
Yeah, I guess that's the way to do it, just like the way
hmm
a lot of other people have been doing it. And that got us talking a lot just about DLC in general. But Blake, what do you think about this situation with Breath of the Wild?
Um, I think well, if we're talking specifically with Breath of the Wild, it doesn't. I think it. I'd have to wait and see because again, I think we mentioned that. I think we both mentioned this during the Switch uh, podcast. Is that I'm not the biggest Zelda fan. I love the games. Don't get me wrong, but like that's not my favorite Nintendo franchise. So it's not something that I'm really like on one side of the argument for. I probably won't end up getting it anyways, even if I do get Breath of the Wild. Um, so for me, it's more or less just like I think it's a very unique approach for Nintendo because for the past few years with the Wii U games, they've had a really consistent and I would actually even go as far as to say optimal approach for DLC with Splatoon, Mario Kart, and Smash Brothers. So I think this is definitely an interesting step for Nintendo. How it will play out, I'm not really sure, but I can definitely see both sides of the arguments where some people are like, this is terrible, and some people are like, this is great. So that's
Hmm.
how where I kind of stand. It's just kind of observing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what gets a lot of people like unsure about this DLC is that it's so different from the way they've been doing their DLC in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Because say with the Smash Brothers, so much stuff in that game. It feels, like there's a lot in it. And then with the DLC, they added, new characters, new maps, and it felt pretty good. Like they were adding stuff on top of it, like they were still trying to work on the game, trying to, give it some life afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But oh, what were you gonna
No,
say?
no, no. Go. I wasn't gonna
Oh,
say anything.
I was gonna say, but even though we were getting that DLC, it felt like we were getting more of what we loved in the game, in the original game, because we got so much great stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, it feels I think it's a lot of it is because they announced it before the game is even out,
Mm-hmm.
and just the fact that that's the way a lot of publishers have been doing their DLC lately.
Yeah, I would say that that's part of I guess part of the distrust from some people, I guess, or um, that some people that like the confliction kind of comes from. Um, it is weird that they announced it so early, you know, because I actually think that DLC historically is I think historically it can both enhance a game, but I think it could also be the death of a game. I think I could go on for a long list of games, but I think a good one to bring up is Battlefront because that's a game that I know.
Hmm.
Um, as a lot of people know, like when that game first came out, $60 upfront, got you about, I would say, maybe like 5 maps, and you basically just had to play the game alone. If you got I believe it was $60 value season pass, you were going to get all the content that was coming out in the future, along with some nice little bonuses right when you start up the game. That made a lot of people upset because it feels like you literally ripped pieces out of the game to make something that we had to pay for. You know what I mean? And that's what I think led to that game basically kind of having a really, really small fan base community and so on and so forth. But I think that Nintendo, well, I think you can look at Splatoon, a game that has like a similar sort of, I guess, I'm not sure how to put this, but like player base maybe, because they're both shooters in their own regards, and they're both very unique and very different. But Splatoon, from what I understand, had a really like a drastic lack of content on its release. You know what I mean? It worked, and the story mode was fun and everything like that, but it had a really it was missing a lot of features that make a good multiplayer experience. But the thing that I think that is key here that made Splatoon successful in the end was the free updates.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Splatoon, because Nintendo was giving stuff out freely, new stages, new maps, new weapons, new costumes, and just all this new stuff, that's what people were like, hey, they're giving us free stuff to play this game. That's awesome. You know what I mean? Whereas Battlefront has sort of started to do that, but I think it's a little too late because right now we're at this point where the community is really small and it's not really growing. You know what I mean? It's if anything, it might be declining. So I think that's more or less the key feature is, or at least one of the key features is how much you're gonna like give us in regards to like price value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think another thing that it also comes down to is just value in general. For example, like we said, you were talking about Smash Brothers. For me, Smash Brothers is a game that I have put hundreds of hours into. I will even go as far as to say that I think it is my most played game of all time, just statistically. So when they were announcing DLC, I was all like, this is a good thing because this is enhancing my experience. I want to play as those characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember at first there was a time where I was like, when I heard that Roy was announced, I was sort of skeptic because I was like, okay, he's just going to be Marth 3.0, you know? But when they showed him off and I saw that he was actually substantially different from Marth, I was all like, oh, okay, you know what? I'll get him. And I was considering not buying him for the Wii U, but when I did get him, it was great because I would have friends over and they'd be all like, "Oh, dude, you got Roy. Roy's my favorite." Or my brother plays Ryu now and he loves Ryu. And I love Mewtwo, and it's fun. You know what I mean? That enhanced my experience of the game. And I think that I got a lot of value out of all those characters, even Bayonetta and Corrin, who I barely play at all. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like, but as opposed to something like Uncharted 4, I'm not gonna buy any DLC in that game, even though I play the multiplayer a lot. It's not worth the value. You know what I mean? It's not that it's not worth it. It's just that it's something I don't devote nearly not even remotely the same amount of time to Uncharted 4 as I do to Smash. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it just wouldn't be in my best interest to buy Uncharted 4's DLC in any regards, except the Lost Legacy, whatever that might end up being, whether it be separate game or DLC, whatever. So
Yeah, and I think an interesting point that you brought up is that DLC like enhancing an experience.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it has to enhance on an like already substantial like game that you already have.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, like a current thing that's happening is with Final Fantasy 15. I don't know if you heard about it, but before the game even came out, they announced a season pass for it.
Mm-hmm.
And in that season pass is pretty much with some smaller stuff. I assume that's gonna be in that, like weapons and stuff like that. The main like portion of it is that it is going to have 3 episodes featuring 3 of like your friends, who you travel with throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is throughout the game, you pretty much get separated from like your friends like at different points throughout the game. And like I haven't beaten it yet, but I got to a point where one of your friends is pretty much like, "Hey, I'm just gonna leave for a bit. See ya." And he just leaves. And then I guess he comes back with like a scar, and you're like, "Oh, I wonder how he got that." But you don't get to play that.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, in Final Fantasy like 6 or 7, there have been times when your party members have left, but you get to follow those party members and experience their stories for
Mm-hmm.
free. That is already in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you just see your friends just go, see ya, or they just come back and go, "Hey man, like how you doing? I had this adventure. I'll tell you later."
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, okay, well, why wasn't this in the game originally?
Mm-hmm.
And so it just feels like, with this kind of DLC, which a lot of publishers have done, it's like it's taking away from what feels like should have been in the game already.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like it's adding. It feels like they took away something just to give it to you later so you could pay for it.
Mm-hmm. I think in regards to DLC, kind of like what you said, is that I think that it also depends. I think people will view DLC a different way depending on what kind of game you're getting or you have. For Final Fantasy 15, it's a very story heavy RPG with a lot of character to it. You know what I mean? So when something like that happens, when an event where a character goes away and then they're going to charge you like $15 or whatever they're charging for the story segment, it's going to feel like, okay, that should have been in the game. You know what I mean? As opposed to like, say, a fighting game which has like zero story and just you're paying for a character with a different playstyle. It's like, okay, I can see why this is within the game. You know what I mean? I actually would go as far as to say that I think fighting games overall have usually the most successful runs with DLC, because I think that they can get away with a lot more. Because if you look at Mortal Kombat X before Alien or Predator or Tremor or whatever, it still has a really strong roster of characters and stages and skins. You know what I mean? But after DLC, it's just better. It's just more. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But if you look at something like you said, Final Fantasy 15, where it feels like they deliberately took pieces out of the game, or basically sort of just kind of nudged you, or I would say in this case, kind of pushed you to purchase the DLC, then I think that that's actually intrusive upon the experience, because it makes you feel like you're playing an incomplete game.
Yeah, or something like Destiny came out, years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I played that and just went, or a lot of people were like that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they saw, oh yeah, they started advertising expansion passes like when I bought this game.
Mm-hmm.
That explains it.
Yeah, no, I completely see that, and it's, again, I think it all comes back down to how much you value the game. Like, if you love Final Fantasy 15, for example, Jonathan, I think if you're really into it and you really enjoy it and you want to play more, like, I think that's how DLC can be looked at as a good thing. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm just getting more. And that's what and to bring it back to Breath of the Wild, I can see that. I see a lot of support for the DLC. I see people like, this is a good thing. This just means more game for us. But I can also, like I said, I can also see the other side where a lot of people are saying, okay, but if Breath of the Wild feels like it has parts ripped out of it so that they could have something else to charge us for, that's a problem. Because, and this kind of brings me around to what I wanted to kind of talk about, is how Breath of the Wild would have been had it been released on something like the GameCube or something like that. You know what I mean? We wouldn't even be talking about DLC. We would be talking about the game itself. You know what I mean? There wouldn't be any like bonus material or bonus maps unless you bought like some special edition. You would just have the game. You know what I mean? And I find it interesting how we've how the gaming industry has kind of gotten to that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like you said, just like whenever you buy a game and they like already advertise a season pass for future content, I think
Hmm.
that was when things start to go, okay, that's interesting.
Hmm.
Because for example, what is it, Arkham Knight?
Yes.
That DLC, looks really cool, and I wouldn't mind buying it just because the stuff they add. But the fact that they advertise it, before the game even comes out, feels odd. Like they could have put it in, but let's just save it for later so you can pay for more.
Exactly. And I actually think that actually has contributed to, in my opinion, has contributed to why Arkham Knight doesn't feel as fun and alive as Arkham City does. Because in Arkham
Mm,
City, the only DLC thing that you really got was the Harley Quinn thing.
hmm
And that was more or less just to retcon the Harley Quinn being pregnant thing. That was the only reason it was there. But if you look at Arkham Knight, it's actually four different new villains like the Mad Hatter, Ra's al Ghul, Killer Croc. They're there, and in my eyes, that's actually kind of a problem because that in my opinion should have been the game. Why is it that I look at Arkham City and even as brief as appearance that they might have, every single major Batman villain is in that game with some side story or something like that. You know what I mean?
hmm
Arkham Knight feels empty when I compare it to Arkham City, even though Arkham Knight, by technological standpoints, should be the bigger, better, more improved game. And I would say it still is. There's some improvements over Arkham City, I would say, but I don't think that those improvements can overshadow the entire Arkham City experience. You know what I mean? And again, I think that even can come back to value, back to like what you as a player value more. You know what I mean? Like I've seen some people I've seen some people about again Breath of the Wild just saying I don't care how much it costs. They could charge me $50. I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna love it. You know what I mean?
hmm
And that's fine. Obviously the Zelda franchise is important to you, and that's totally fine. I don't think there's any problem with that. Um, but I think those people will realize that just hypothetically, if Breath of the Wild felt like an incomplete game, they would of course be upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, so I
yeah,
think it just comes down to what kind of games you enjoy and what you're willing to spend to enhance or that experience. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, like I said, Smash Brothers for me is one of the big ones, but as opposed to something like this actually happened recently. I was looking at PlayStation All Stars. I'm like, maybe I should go and buy the last two DLC characters I never bought. But when I thought about it, I felt like that would be a waste of money because while I like the game, I don't play it nearly as much as I used to at all. You know what I mean? So buying those characters would be just a waste of time. I actually think that DLC, in some ways, you should look at it as buying another game. That's just buying a game because I think you need to look at what you're buying. Number one, your own schedule. Like, can I sit down and play this? Is this going to be worth it? You know what I mean? I would say that when you're buying DLC, when you're considering it, I would say just look at it like you're buying another game. So,
That's an interesting viewpoint.
um, yeah, I mean, that's usually how I kind of look at it because some games cost as much as the DLC. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
So, again, it all comes back down to I think value. So,
Yeah, but it is a fine line where, like you said, how much is it adding, but also like, does it feel as if it could have been in the game originally?
yeah, and in that regard, I think that means when you feel like you're playing half a game, that's a problem. And I would even go as far as to say that I don't think that that's fair for a developer to like. I understand video games are expensive as heck to make. They're ridiculously expensive. They're almost, I won't even say almost, they're up there in the movie budget range. You know what I mean? In terms
Yeah.
of how much it costs to make them. So I can understand companies wanting to reap as much money as they possibly can, but I think that there's a limit to what you should be doing to get said money. I would say that if you just make a solid game, the people will come. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If you just make a good experience, DLC or no DLC, people will come. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's really why a lot of people are worried about Breath of the Wild because Nintendo has always been the best with DLC
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, Splatoon was free or Smash Brothers, such a big game, and they added more to it. But it felt like you know it was extra. It didn't feel like it was taken out. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like they were still working on this game, months after it was over.
Yeah, but even Smash had technically free DLC. Everybody got a Miiverse stage on the Wii U.
True.
So I mean, well, that's not much, but it's a new stage, and you can support, and like they updated it with the Miiverse stuff. You know what I mean? With the support your character and stuff like that. So I would say that I'm not really worried about Nintendo because I think they've shown that their games are pretty pretty solid. You know what I mean? There have been times where it feels like there's a drastic lack of content, like in say Mario Tennis Ultra Smash or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a game, for example, that has just a drastic lack of anything. Um, but other than that, I think that especially with a title like Legend of Zelda, I think that it's going to be DLC that's actually meaningful, and hopefully worth the price. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say $20 for a season pass and for what you're getting isn't that bad. I mean, it's certainly better than some of the other season passes that other companies
That
have
is
offered.
true. That is
Yeah,
true.
so I mean, I've seen some people saying that that's really expensive, and I'm like, maybe depending on your viewpoint, but I feel like you could find much worse. Destiny, dear God,
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
yeah, I feel bad
Still,
for.
still making those expansions into the new games.
Yeah, and you can get them all now, and it's just, yeah, that's I I think that it's gonna be okay for Breath of the Wild fans. I don't really think they have anything to worry about. But I think it's just a very strange um, route to take, you know. So they're usually like game first, DLC second. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like you said, it's very bizarre. But I don't think it's gonna be like
Yeah,
a,
I think it's gonna be fine, especially because they showed that like the DLC is gonna be at least for the like the extra story portion of the game or the DLC that's gonna be released in like winter 2017,
mm-hmm.
like well far off from when the original game comes out. So I think even though they announced the season pass, before the game's even out, which was odd,
Mm-hmm.
I think it shows that they are going to be spending a lot of time on that extra portion.
Yeah, and that's good. It's good to see something like that. So I hope that's the case. It most likely will be. Nintendo's never been one to give half an effort. You know what I mean? Usually. Uh, so I think that Zelda fans have really nothing to worry about, regardless of how you feel about DLC. Because I'm sure Breath of the Wild without the DLC is still a perfectly fine game.
Hmm.
So.
Yeah, it's just when developers, publishers get a little overboard, as we said, like with Destiny, that's when we need to hold back.
Yeah. There is good DLC and there is bad DLC, and I think it all just comes down to what kind of game you're playing, how much you like that game, and if you're willing to, quote unquote, enhance your experience. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because there is such a thing as stupid DLC. But I think that's something for you to kind of decide.
Yeah.
So that's really all I have to say about about the whole thing is, just I would say just approach it like you would approach buying another game. Just figure out if you have, number one, the time, the money, just is it going to be worth it in the end? So.
Yeah, that's all I have to say too.
Yeah. So that was easy.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was Blake and I talking about DLC. It's an interesting topic.
Mhm.
And so if you have anything to add or, your opinions on the subject, put it down in the comments below because, we love just discussion in general.
Yeah, and if you click the link in the description below, you can get our season pass for $20. You'll get 3 discussions,
Mhm,
about 10
mhm.
minutes each, and you guys will follow us till holiday 2018. So yeah, it's gonna be great, guys.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, and don't forget to if you want, follow us on Twitter at NerdsJust. And yeah, so I think that's it.
All right, that was good. That was great.
Okay. So see you guys in the next video and take care.